Hey, up, right, we're back to the subject of the UK government's war against the motorist, using them as cash cows and making life as difficult as they possibly can. Now, I came across a news article early on Monday morning, and I've got to admit, after the first couple of paragraphs, I clicked off it laughing out loud at just how ridiculous our world is becoming. All I can say is I'm bloody glad that I don't live in that London. But the more I thought about this particular news release, and there was only one newspaper that had published it at the time, was actually this could adversely affect motorcyclists. And I'll explain why as we go on in this video. Now, it centres around Lambeth Town Council, or Lambeth Council, whatever it's actually called, in South London. Now, Lambeth Council has identified a total of 200 privately owned houses within their catchment area that have what they call illegal driveways that they use for parking the vehicles on. But they can legalise these driveways if they pay the council a sum of £4,000 for permission to use it as a driveway, plus planning permission and the actual groundworks required to drop the curb, because this is what it all centres around, which has been calculated to cost each of these households around £7,000 just to be able to park on their own private property. Now, just about every city, town and even village in the UK has what are known as terraced houses. The houses that were sort of certainly pre-war and some post-war up until the late 1950s and into the 1960s were built with no provision for private parking of motor vehicles because, very few people owned motor vehicles in those days. Now, from the sort of mid-1960s onwards, this started to change with new builds where, building companies did start to incorporate private driveways for private parking into properties that they were building because it helped sell them. Certainly by the 1970s, most people owned motor cars and they needed to park off-road because of narrow streets, etc. Parking's always at a premium. And it does feel safer parking your vehicle on your own property rather than leaving it out on the public roads. Now, actually, there's no such thing as illegal parking on your own property. That's a bit of a misleading statement by the council. I think that's a bit of a gaslighting term. What this all revolves around is that there's never been any official registration of a dropped curb at these properties, i.e. you've just got a standard curb there. It's not been dropped to provide a slope for easy access across the pavement and onto the property. You see, what's happened over the decades is that owners of these properties, where they've had sufficient front garden space, they've converted it from garden into parking space. They've put some sort of gravel or hard standing there. And there's absolutely nothing illegal about that. It's the method of getting the vehicle from the roadway onto that parking space that is potentially a report for summons offence. But that's not something that the council can really do anything about. It's a report for summons offence. It would need a police officer to witness it and then interview and report the driver for effectively driving on the pavement. Now, that's not as easy as it sounds. My worry here is that if they get away with this, it's going to set a precedent which other councils around the country might adopt. And I know that a lot of viewers of this channel that own motorcycles that live in the UK have similar sort of arrangements. They prefer to keep the motorcycle at the side or around the back of the property in a shed or whatever where it's safe, which means crossing the pavement, even though they don't have an actual drive, with the motorcycle to get it onto their property. And because it's quite difficult pushing a heavy motorcycle up a curb, they tend to ride it. And a motorcycle is technically still a motor vehicle, so this could potentially open up a whole new can of worms for motorcyclists all over the country. But you see, I don't think that Lambeth Council has been able to persuade the local police force to get involved with this. For a start, it would take enormous resources 200 properties. They would have to actually have policemen standing outside some of those properties at certain times of the day in order to catch digressors. It would require some sort of large-scale operation to catch these people out, and then as soon as that operation had finished, they could quite easily just return to doing what they'd always done, because it's still going to work out a lot cheaper, even with a fine, than paying out £7,000 for permission to use the driveway. Now, what actually sparked this off is that Lambeth Council recently has been undertaking a study as to whether or not they're going to be able to put up a parking permit system in the streets involved. This meaning, of course, that they're going to drag some revenue in because residents are going to have to pay for parking permits. And then they've realised that this situation exists whereby people have unofficial driveways. And the council has realised that if it respects those driveways, it's going to lose an awful lot of money in these parking bays for parking permits. In fact, from the council's point of view, it might not be economically viable. Now, the reasons that they've put forward, it was going to come into this video at some stage. The reason they've put forward for implementing this parking permit system is that free, uncontrolled parking contributes to global warming. This has got nothing to do with the council using motorists as cash cows. It's about saving the planet there. We've got that out there. It's got nothing to do with the fact that this particular council is said to be in deficit this year to the tune of almost £70 million because they've overspent, so they're trying to claw some money back from any source they possibly can. And of course, the motorist is always a good target. They're doing it to save the planet. Now, there is some legal validity to this council's position, I think, although I think it might be tenuous, and I'll explain why in a moment. You would think under circumstances like this, if they thought they had a good legal case, they would be able to force these residents to apply for planning permission, etc., in order to have the curb dropped. But they're not doing that. They're using a sort of a blackmail and saying, well, if you don't apply for it, we'll just put a parking bay in front of your house so that you can't get access. We'll obstruct your access with a vehicle onto your property. Which sounds a bit fishy to me. I mean, granted, litigation against all these property owners, 200 of them, would be very expensive. They're only going to get, I think, about £1 million out of all of them if they all comply and apply for the relevant permissions. And I dare say to take 200 of them to court would cost a lot more than £1 million. But I think there might be something else at play here, which is held within the realms of common law over right of access and rights of way. You see, there's a mechanism in common law that if someone has been illegally using a portion of land as a right of way openly for 7 years or more, it becomes a right of way by what I think is known as adverse possession. And I might be totally wrong in this case. I'm just floating a theory. I think in a lot of cases the owners of these properties probably made these alterations to their front gardens decades ago, some of them probably dating back to the 1970s, maybe others more recent because obviously with the advent of electric cars they found it necessary to implement a situation like this so that they're able to charge the cars at home. Either way, if enough of these people have been using this as a right of way for many years, in excess of 7 years, openly, so that they can be seen doing it, without any objection from, the council, and let's face it, once they've created a situation like this, it's quite easy to see it. It's not exactly hidden. Then they might have gained the legal privilege of right of access over the pavement by adverse possession, which is possibly why the council is not threatening to take legal action against them, because if this point was put forward, it could well be that the local council would be responsible for dropping the curb at their own expense. And in any case, if they do put up a parking bay in front of these people's properties, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they will be causing an obstruction of a right of way. Now, as I said, I'm not 100% sure about this. I mean, I did have to deal with an incident many years ago, back in the 1990s. A similar sort of scenario, although not exactly the same. It was more a case of it was causing a breach of the peace between two parties, but they did have the legal backing of an adverse possession of a right of way. And it may well not, apply in this particular case. I'm not a legal expert, but I just have a feeling that something like this has come into play here, which is why the council's acting the way it is. Let me know what you think. I'll certainly be keeping an eye on this one to see how it pans out. Now, since I initially saw this on Monday, a lot of other national newspapers have also jumped on board and reported this story. And I'll leave a link in the video description down below for those of you that might want to sort of go and read through it, although they all sort of almost read exactly the same. I think we all need to keep abreast of these intrusions into our freedoms. Things are going a little bit too far. So I just thought I would bring this one to your attention. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you're not already a subscriber. Now, there are other ways that you can help me out via my Patreon page, the super thanks button down below, or via PayPal donations. Not essential, but is appreciated. I am, of course, going to be back on Friday, so until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.